captured in this conversation about powers. Do y'all notice that we have someone special just joining us?
We do.
Hello, everybody.
Do y'all see? So,
Oh my
How's everybody
goodness!
doing?
who is that? You're getting some emoji reaction.
Oh.
Oh my gosh. So Minh Lê is here with us, kindly offered to surprise our book club and join us.
How's everybody doing?
I am at a loss for words.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. We were just talking about which powers we would want, if we would want a Green Lantern ring or other kinds of powers. And we actually had a question that maybe you can answer.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for letting me pop in. I saw you post on Instagram that you were having this book chat, so I figured, first of all, thank you for choosing the book, and I couldn't help but pop in. So yeah, if you all have any questions, let me know. I'm definitely here to answer.
So start thinking, y'all, of questions you have about this book. What experience of being a writer, writing comics. We had a question. I think Gus, you were asking about the about Xander's ring. So we know that there's this.
Yeah, since Ty's ring is made of jade,
Mhm.
is there like a stone that's the yellow lantern rings are made out of?
That's a really good question. So in my mind, the ring wasn't actually jade. It's just that he always assumed it was a jade ring because his grandma wore it, but it's actually made out of whatever the Green Lantern rings are made out of. So the yellow lantern rings, I need to check in with the folks at DC Comics to see exactly what they're made out of. So that's a really good question.
It could be a topaz.
Topaz?
Topaz is yellow.
Could be a topaz.
That would be that's a good idea.
But it will have to be a stone that draws power from like strength and fear.
Right.
So it must be fine like a stone like
diamond
that.
one.
But diamond is usually like blue.
No, there's white, pink, blue, and yellow. As far as I know, there might be more.
Yeah, diamond is kind of like power.
I love how we're doing a deep dive into minerals.
I have a diamond birthstone, so
nice.
Maybe I can qualify.
So what we're going to do, friends, is we're going to take turns asking questions. So feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you. Feel free to start thinking about questions you might have. I want to make sure everybody has a chance for questions they might ask. Yes, Hannah, go for it.
How long did it take you to publish the book?
That's a really good question. I'm trying to think. A book usually takes at least 2 years from the time you start writing it to the time it hits the shelf. And my part of the job is only half of it and probably less than half because the illustrations take so long. There's so many pictures. So I try to work as fast as I can to give the illustrator lots of time to do the pictures. And then what I didn't know before I started is, so I usually think of books in terms of like an author and an illustrator, right? But for comics, there's also the colorist, who is the person in charge of coloring in all the artwork. So if you like to color, when I go talk to kids, I'm like, there's actually a job out there for you where you can just color for a living. And I wish I knew that when I was your age, because I would have maybe done a different type of career. But there's a colorist, and then there's a letterer who does all the letters, so putting all the words and all the sound effects. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. So I'd say at a minimum for a book, it's 2 years. But with a lot of comics, you'll get like the monthly serial kind of versions, and those move a lot faster. Comics tends to be faster than the typical book industry, but it still takes some time and a lot of work.
So we can see them quickly, but they take a lot of time. That was a great question, Hannah.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Who would like to
what something that a lot of comics people and book people I talk to are like, it took me 2 years to do this book, and then it took you half an hour to read it, or like an hour to read it.
We were just talking about how like every time we read this, you find something new. Like the whole scene where he's protecting Jordan the cat. Like I've read this book several times and I never noticed until this reading because somebody else pointed it out to me. So like I feel like that's also the power of comics, is that,
Uh,
the consumability of it, but also the rereadability of it, finding something new. Or like the shape of the couch, Gus was pointing out in Xander's like penthouse is like the
Yeah.
shape of his um what's it called? Like
Couch is the shape of the
Wait. So who figured that one out? Was that you, Gus?
Yeah.
That is really impressive. Because when Andy sent me the artwork, he sent it to me and he was like, "Did you notice anything about this page?" And I was like, um, "They're really big windows." I'm not sure. He's like, "No, he's like, I designed the couches to look just like the Sinestro Corps symbol." And I was like, blown away. He's like, and his whole point was like, he wanted to make it subtle enough that you wouldn't notice it at first, but that hopefully some people, when they read more, look deeper, they find it. So you're the first person.
After I read the book the third time, I started to think, something about that couch looks familiar. Other than the fact that I've read this book 3 times already. I'm gonna go look at.
You're officially the first reader that I've met who's figured that out on their own. So congratulations.
And so I flipped to the page where with I flipped to the page with Xander and dot. It's this. Maybe we should call it the couch lanterns.
That's about my speed.
If you have all the power of the universe, you think you would have pretty comfortable couches, right?
Oh, the power of the universe in a couch.
Because you never want people to. The goal as an author is to have books that people want to read again, right? So you have to put things in there in layers so that you'll be rewarded when you read it again. You can discover new things or different meanings or different details. So yeah, so that's definitely something that we go for. So I'm glad that worked out in this case.
That's awesome. Other friends who have questions, you can put it in the chat if you don't want to use your mic. You can also just message it to me if you want, whatever you all are comfortable with. I think Grace had a question while you all start thinking more about your questions.
Yeah, hi. My name is Grace, and I wanted to know, besides Green Lantern, if you had another favorite superhero. It doesn't need to be in the DC universe. It could be in Marvel or anywhere else. No
Yeah.
judgment, of course, but would love to know.
That's a great question. Thankfully there's nothing in my DC contract saying that I have to answer these questions with just the DC universe. But I grew up reading mostly like Batman and Spider-Man, but the ones that kind of I resonated the most with me were X-Men. And so I had a soft spot for Wolverine, especially there's Jim Lee's run of X-Men, and I spent a lot of like middle school trying to draw his version of Wolverine, which is amazing because now he's in charge of DC Comics. So I was working on this and got to go to like a banquet with him, and I was like kind of like starstruck. Like, this is the guy that like shaped so much of my imagination growing up, and kind of like what I was spending my daydreaming time thinking about, and then to get to be working with him was really amazing. So yeah, I'd say X-Men to me I always like because there's so much variety and so much kind of like quirkiness within that universe that I always felt like there's a lot to dig into.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
We have a question from Vivian. Why did you give him a cat?
That's a great question. When we were working on the book, and I wanted to set the book in the store, like because my grandparents actually owned a store themselves, and so I spent a lot of time there, and it felt like a very natural place to set a story. And spending time in different stores. My grandparents didn't have a cat in the store, but if you go to stores and say, a lot of times you'll see like a bodega cat kind of hanging out, and it just, people love animals. I love animals. It's nice way to sneak something in there, and then to open up the book with him saving the cat from somebody. It's like, okay, it's like a mini way of showing him in a mini heroic phase, and then kind of setting the stage for if like his instinct in that scene is to jump in and save somebody, then that's an instinct that will serve him well moving forward. So kind of like as a little bit of a preview.
That's beautiful. Thank you. People taking care of animals. make good heroes. I think Ariana had a question, and then Bree.
Yeah. Does Green Lantern Legacy have like a moral?
That's a really good question. It's well, before I give you my answer, were there any morals or things that kind of jumped out to you when you were reading it?
No, not really. Just a random question.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And for me, if anything, it was a couple things. One, when I was working on the story, people kept asking me, like, is it strange to write a superhero story for kids? Like, is it kind of strange? And for me, I was like, this is the most natural thing in the world, because if you read other books for kids and kind of like coming of age stories, I feel like an origin story is exactly the same as most of the coming of age, like middle grade books that you'll read, except that now you have superpowers on top of it. So a lot of the same issues about like learning how you fit in with the world, coming to terms with like your own changing body and powers and stuff like that, all kind of fit into the idea of a superhero origin story. And for me, the two things that come through in this book are the idea of legacy, and Ty coming up to a point where like, is he going to draw strength and power from his family and community, or is it something he's going to push from and like go away from? And then also the idea of like taking care of those around you. Like the book ends on them bringing groceries to another refugee family, and that's because he took that example from his grandmother. And for me, it was important to show that there are different ways of being a hero, right? You don't need to have the ring, you don't need to have all the superpowers to do good deeds. So he drew a lot of his inspiration from his grandmother, both as a superhero and both just also as a person who has those values and wants to help others. So if there's one moral or one thing I hope people take away from the book, it's that you can look around you and find real examples of heroism all around you, and even without actual literal superpowers. So, but thank you for that question.
Fantastic. Bree, oh,
A super
this says by my power. Can you read what's on your drawing, Gus?
I think I see by my power, green couches light. I love it.
Fan art as we speak. Bree, I think you had a question.
Yeah. My question is that I know in the book it shows that that he falls into his own drawing. Mm-hmm. And why did you make him fall into his own drawing, and why did you have the other the yellow lantern, him as a yellow lantern?
That's a really good question. Thank you. So something that I established in the book was that his grandmother kind of got her strength and like honed her skills through meditation. And so they're at some point they're like, oh, why don't you try meditating? And he tries, but he's unsuccessful. And that's very much like me. I try to meditate all the time. I have a couple of meditation pillows in my office, and they're covered in dust because I don't sit at them nearly often enough. But for him, it was like his form of meditation, his form of kind of like connecting with his own self and spirit is through drawing. So in this case, he starts to draw and he gets so wrapped up into it that he kind of like falls into the drawings. And that's to show that that's where he is kind of like most in touch with himself. He's like kind of loses himself in that moment. And him encountering the Yellow Lantern version of himself is the kind of like literal embodiment of him facing his own fears, right? Because Yellow Lanterns are supposed to be about fear, and like they draw their strength from fear. So that's him coming, facing his own fears in face to face. And so in order for him to later on fully reach his own potential, he has to figure out a way to overcome that fear. So in the end, he does figure out a way to move past it, and that's when he's able to become more powerful. Does that make sense to you? Wait, well, thanks for asking that.
Hannah has a question.
This is just one last one. Was the book occasionally for someone?
Occasionally for someone?
Yeah, like did you make it for them?
That's a good question. Let me pull out something. Oh, hopefully. So I didn't write it for someone, but it was if I wrote it for anyone, it was probably for the young men back in the day, and trying to think about like what book he would have liked to see. But the book was inspired by my own grandmothers, especially. So when I was trying to come up with an idea for a book, DC Comics had emailed me, and they said, we're starting a new line of graphic novels for young readers. We'd love to invite you to pitch us a story. And I was like, one second. They said, look at all our characters from like Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman on down, and see what you can come up with. And nothing was really sticking until I got to Green Lantern. And there was a story about an individual who has a really strong strength of will and their own this magical green ring. And I suddenly had this flash of my own grandmother, who's here. And she always wore a jade ring. And she's one of like the strongest people I know. You would not want to get on her bad side. And our family's originally from Vietnam, and she's very much responsible for willing our family out of Vietnam during the war. I was born here in the States, but my family had to escape. And so she very much was like a hero in our own family story. So it made sense for me when I was trying to figure out an idea for a story to start with someone who was a hero to me. So I guess you could say I wrote it for her and wanted her to, she's not with us anymore, but I wanted a book to honor her and what I thought of her. And my other grandmother, who's also a hero of mine, she's 98 years old and lives in Vietnam. And I hadn't been back to Vietnam in over 30 years, since I was like 10 years old. But I got to go a couple summers ago, and I got to show her the book. There she is. And then I also got to give her very own Green Lantern ring. So she is there showing off her own powers. So it's a very personal book to me. So I'd say I wrote it for them in a way. So, but then thank you for that question.
We were talking earlier about that like showing our elders in like these heroic roles, and that it's so powerful to have stories where it's not idealizing youth. It's about that, like these are the people who like have the legacy that we connect to, and that like they are heroes and heroic in lots of ways. So I love that we get to like really spotlight that role and think about the elders in our lives who inspire us and are literally why we're here. So
yeah, no,
that's really awesome.
I'm so glad that came through. A lot of times people ask me, like, was it really fun to write a Vietnamese boy as a superhero? And I'm like, yeah, that was great. But really it was the grandma superhero that I really got excited about, because you don't see that as often on the page. So it is nice to show, like you said, that generation in a very heroic light.
So on page 15, when Ty found the ring on his bed, he put it back on his grandma's drawer, but then he heard a knock on the door, and then this green light hit him. What was that green light? Was it the ring?
So yeah, it was the ring flying down the hallway back to him. So an interesting point is, when I first wrote this story, I had the grandmother actually give him the ring, and like kind of like give it to him as a gift. But then my editors at DC, so what the great thing about working with DC Comics is there's a Green Lantern expert on site. So they like checked into the Green Lantern expert, and they're like, that's not actually how the ring works. The ring has to find the next person. So the way we had in the story is, now the ring is in the grandmother's room, and it kind of like flies down and finds Ty, as like identifies him as the next holder of the ring. So that green light.
That's the night she dies.
Right. And so the ring passes on and has to find the next person. And sometimes it's just finding someone who has a strong will. And so that finds him down the hallway. So that green light is the ring flying down the hallway to his room. And the knocking is just the ring banging against the door.
At least it's polite.
Exactly. It said it does hit him in the head at least like 3 times in the book.
Oh my gosh, what great close reading, Ariana. That's amazing. Yeah. Bree, you have your hand up?
Yeah. So my question is that I know when he when he goes to space and he meets the Green Lantern that's Queen, I guess. I have two questions.
Mhm.
Why did you make her live on the moon, and why did you also make her Queen?
That's another great question. She is actually a character that I didn't create. She's an already existing Green Lantern. And what I loved about writing Green Lantern is that there are so many different Green Lanterns out there. There's and each Green Lantern kind of has their own section of the universe that they kind of patrol and take care of. So for me, I was like, instead of recreating Superman or recreating Batman, I could create two new Green Lanterns and kind of like put them into this universe. So Queen Iolande is already a Green Lantern that exists out there and is in the comics. So I wanted to bring her in just to kind of show the variety that already exists there. And in this case, she doesn't live on the moon, but she's coming to the moon because that's where they're training. So she's kind of doing Jon Stewart a favor and coming in to help out. But the
Jon Stewart already in the story, or did you make him up?
Jon Stewart is also an existing Green Lantern. So I liked, I tried my best I wanted to create new characters, but I also wanted to kind of pay respect to the universe that was already there. And I wanted to like have touchstones to things that people already love. So Jon Stewart is a Green Lantern that you'll see in a lot of like the Justice League cartoons. I was like, it made sense for him to be the mentor here. And so I wanted very much to show that this was a universe that was already very rich and then is so broad that we're just having like a story taking place in one corner of the universe, but trying to bring in as much as possible.
Did you have another part of your question, Bree?
Yeah. I don't. I know that there's I know that there's three rings, or there's more, but like I know there's the other evil one is a red one.
Mhm.
Are you don't have to answer this, but are you going to ever incorporate? Are you ever going to use any of the other rings in any of the sequels of the book?
That is a really good question, and definitely something I'm going to think about. What I like about the Green Lantern universe is, like you said, there's a green ring, which is based on willpower or draws its strength from willpower. There's yellow, which
And
draws
creativity.
from fear. Red is like rage or anger. But my favorite is blue, which draws its strength from hope. There's, I think, orange, which draws its strength from like greed. So there's like each
And I think
there's
like
a different color for a different part of the emotional spectrum, and like so once you start diving into the Green Lantern books, there's so many different ways to play around with this. So to start, and one of my original manuscripts had rings from all over the place, right? And when we talked through it, my editors are like, for a lot of people, this is going to be their first introduction to Green Lantern. So let's not make it too complicated to start. Let's start with something a little more simple. Yeah, thanks for letting me pop in. Thanks for tagging me online so I knew about this.
Oh my gosh, thank you for just coming into our program, like, and
I'm on
surprising me.
deadline for another book right now, so this is a nice little procrastination break.
We are happy to procrastinate with you anytime you want. Just name the place, time. I don't care what my program actually is. Like,
Make
I'm
sure
here
to get
for
some
it.
snacks, pretzels or popcorn, preferably.
Okay. Yes. Thank you so much. Let's give Min a round of applause. Thank you so much for joining us and surprising us and sharing all your wisdom.
Yeah, thank you all for reading, and keep it up.
Yes.
And I'll have to come back when the sequel is out.
Oh my God, yes. And we'll make it like an official, like, author visit style thing, like all of that.
Sounds good. But yeah, no, thank you again for everything you're doing, and keep up. I know it's a tough year, so keep up the good work. You're doing amazing, everybody.
Thank you. You too.
Thank
Your books
you.
have meant a lot to us,
Thank
especially
you.
this year.
Same here.